Hey everybody, welcome back to another Digital Artcast episode. Thanks once again for joining me. The last couple of months have been great. Some awesome stuff has been happening. And just in general, trying to make sure that I've got some of the best guests I can get on the podcast. Talk about industry, art, 3D, 2D, all that kind of stuff encompassed in the one podcast. So this time I managed to get someone on board who I've actually kind of saw from afar for a while, but recently through a kind of mutual friend or a Facebook post, we managed to kind of talk to each other and organise this podcast to get more and talk about his career. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome along Mr. Max Davenport.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no worries, man. No worries at all. I need to get that kind of that flow back into introducing guests. It's been a while because
You're good, man.
I've been away. The last couple were pre-recorded, so it's been a month or two since I've had people on. But yeah,
It's a good intro.
yeah, man. So recently I think it was either Grace Lou or someone else had posted your work, and I knew of your work beforehand, but I'd never really thought about it for a while. And then when the Borderlands stuff had came out, that was all kind of hitting the screens, and we managed to kind of talk, and I was like, oh yeah, you come on the podcast, it would be great. But I've watched you on for a while, actually. You were one of probably the first people I noticed, even way back before Hi-Rez, the stuff you were doing. But then, yeah, now you've been at Gearbox now. You've just shipped Borderlands 3, which has been great, successful, amazing. Congratulations to you and the whole team. So yeah, you've had an extensive kind of career even before that. You've done a lot of big projects. Even before Borderlands, you were working on SMITE at Hi-Rez. So kind of take us back to the start, because I don't know this story either. It'd be lovely to hear. But so did you go to school for art? Did you do the whole high school, college, university kind of thing, or?
Yeah, no, I mean I've been drawing since I can remember. I remember actually I got in trouble when I was in first grade, elementary school. Our teacher, she busted out crayons and construction papers. She's like, "All right, kids, I want you to draw a train." And I remember growing up, I had this painting in my room of this like big steam engine train at the train station, and people were getting on and off it, and it was just kind of something that I had. But I remember like studying it even like at a young age, and then so she comes around, all the kids are drawing. It's like circles for wheels and like blue on top for the sky, just like how you would kind of imagine like a kid's drawing to be. She gets to my desk and she calls my parents, and she's just like, "You need to get in here right now." And they're like, what's wrong? She's like, "There's something wrong with your son." So we're all in this office, and they show my parents the drawing, and it's like crude perspective, like the train is like going like fading into the distance down the track, and like it's like coming straight at you, and she thought it was like this like suicidal like weird like, and it was just like, no, I've just been looking at a painting of a train for a while, like.
Oh god.
Yeah. So I've been doodling and drawing and stuff, and I didn't really get serious about it until I think I was in high school, but yeah, I went to college. I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which I don't think exists anymore. I'm pretty sure it went bankrupt. But I initially went for industrial design. I wanted to. I was big into cars and transportation and all that kind of stuff. Really
kind of Scott Robertson route, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of the only route that I knew. I'd loved games for like in movies, just entertainment for a long time, and I never. I guess I just never imagined that was a career path that I could like go down. So it's
a very common tale from a lot of artists I know who are always like, yeah, we never knew as kids this could be a job, and yeah, because I mean the games industry in general is still, I would say, even though at this point we're at, I think it's still in its infancy, because if you compare it to the film industry, which has been going since the early 1900s, games has only been a thing since maybe properly since the 80s. So, we're only talking maybe 30 years.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Just kind of seeing even the quality of like games art education that's progressed over the last maybe even like 15 years. It's just like the trend of like either like campus-based like actual colleges, or now you have like the workshop and like studios like Nomon and
Brainstorm, Focal Point, QBrush, all this kind of stuff.
All of these wonderful, and it's like people who kind of grew up, either they went to these schools and they didn't get the proper education and now have like gone back like, okay, this is how you
Yeah.
actually do it. And it's been a cool like learning renaissance as far as like this industry is concerned. There's so
Yeah.
many more resources and tools now.
So you went industrial route. So you were planning to make cars and kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah. So I went. I did 2 quarters. I was in that track for about 6 months, and I wasn't really enjoying it. It was a lot of rudimentary. I mean, like the base projects were essential. It was a lot of just repetition, a lot of just core, um, just technique.
fundamental stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. It was not the things I wanted to be doing, but I needed it at that point. I was 18-year-old. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But no, I had roommates who were in there making monsters, and I was like, oh, what's this about? What are you guys doing? Like, oh, we're in the games track, and I was like, and so I called my parents. I'm like, mom, dad, I am switching my major. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I'm gonna make video games. They're like, you're never gonna go anywhere with that. I was like, all right, well,
Oh
we'll, we'll,
God. Yeah.
we'll, we'll see what happens. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it turned out pretty good for me. I got
Mhm.
lucky. So, but no, yeah, after school, I actually got I interned at a medical company back home for 6 months. Stayed with my parents, and I ended up getting a job. One of my teachers worked at a local studio, Shell Games, which is
Mhm.
a wonderful studio in Pittsburgh. Um, so I worked there for about a year doing
Mhm.
concept, which coming like out of college, like being able to do the exact thing I wanted to do, I feel pretty lucky about that. The fact that I was like I had the opportunity to do it and that I didn't immediately get fired for ineptitude.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, well, people always talk about this thing where they're like, "Oh, I felt lucky," but then I think for a lot of people, I remember somebody, I never know who said the quote, but somebody said that luck for them was preparedness meets opportunity. So yeah, you probably were a valuable asset at that time, but then obviously you met the right people at the time who wanted you part of that team. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and I often tell this to a lot of students, a lot of
mm,
people who are kind of coming through the first time. It's like, oh, like how do you get these opportunities? And part of it is like, well, there's a lot of luck involved.
mm,
Obviously, there has to be the right time. There has to be openings. There has to be connection there. But it's like, yeah, you have to be good at what you do, and you have to be a nice person. You have to be able to work well with others.
mm,
And if you're
yeah,
I've run into a lot of stubborn young artists who have more talent than sense,
oh
and they end up being really good, but then they can't get along with anyone, and they end up not being able to kind of push forward. So it's a real hindrance.
yeah.
Like don't be rude.
Don't be a dick, guys.
Yeah.
Life lesson. No, it's a very common trait, and I think I've seen through the few years I've been here, I've already seen people who have came with a bad attitude, and because the industry is so small, they're quickly rooted out, and yeah, they don't try to get much more opportunities. I mean, I know people in studios specifically who are really super talented, but they're just not a team player. So, but then sometimes that's just a thing where there's a cross and a divide where some people
Mhm.
will probably be better suited to freelance as 95 in a studio. So yeah, you've got to kind of decide early on, I think, what you feel is the. But then even with freelance, you still need to work with an AD. You still need to work with a team in a sense. So there is a sense of you need to be able to get on in some respect. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of rooting out the different kinds of like work culture that people prefer.
Yeah,
Because I'd say like I do concept art, but at my core, like I consider myself a game developer first. Like it's
right.
not that I just want to focus purely on the art. Like I always have questions about design. I always have questions about narrative. I always
Which is
want to
good, which is
yeah,
I think is an essential part of working in games, regardless of your skill. If you're 3D, 2D coding, I think you have to have that passion for
right.
designing and building games.
Yeah. I will say like I won't talk about the quality of my education, but I was able to kind of touch a lot of different things. We didn't have a concept art track at my
Mhm.
school, so a lot of that was just kind of scouring the internet. I think
Yeah.
one of the first really good tutorials that I just kind of poured over. Devin Katie Lee, huge inspiration of mine. I've always loved his work. Um, but he had this tutorial of this character from Dune, and I
Mhm.
just poured over his process for that for a long time. So
Cool.
while I still was able to kind of get access. It's like, oh, I learned how to rig. I learned how to do like some animation and 3D and sculpting and like all these things. It was like that was really kind of the pattern. It was like, okay, I want to stick on this. And but yeah, it's I'm really happy for kids, or I should say just students now who have
Yeah.
all of these resources now. That's just like all it takes is a
There's
little bit
always
of like self-starter.
yeah.
Go for it. Just don't even ask questions. Just really run with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost at this point like too much to choose from because there's now like so many schools that offer, tracks to help people. But then I think the key thing I've seen to students that I've talked to, and I'm luckily going back to do another talk this week, but when I talk to them, I usually say having a specialization or having an idea of where you want to focus is always good to start with because
Mhm.
I think when you try to build yourself as a generalist sometimes, unless you are a highly skilled generalist where you can do a lot of things competently, then it becomes a harder path to look down because then you're splitting your time amongst so many different tasks
Right.
rather than just getting really good at one thing. So yeah, that's and I've suffered from it definitely. I've definitely had struggles of like, do I want to do concept? Do I want to do 3D? Would I prefer? And now I'm trying to push obviously more 3D stuff, but
Yeah.
it's hard in the start because there's now so many schools and so many opportunities to do different things. Trying to settle on one thing is one of the hardest things, I think.
Especially starting out, like I don't think anyone who kind of comes out of a 2 to 4 year program like that, having only just started doing game art, has enough skill to really push forward and to do all of those tracks. Like I
Yeah,
mean, like, yeah, I learned basic amounts of all of those, but I would, even though I learned how to do rigging, I would never consider myself a rigger or an animator or any of that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, like pushing
yeah,
a specialty there out of the gate is really strong. I would say that if you are looking to kind of just work on your own and make your own projects, if you have an aptitude for multiple like kind of paths like that, like absolutely go for it. Like never limit yourself to one thing. But if you are trying to really get in and cement yourself as a like in a core position, then yeah, you have to choose a specialty because yeah, in any studio that I've worked in, everything is compartmentalized. Everybody has like their job. You're not just
their
running
own
around.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you're not running around like every other week, like, oh, I'm going to model this week. I'm going to animate next week. Like, no, you're not, idiot. Like, get the hell back to your
you're
desk.
paid to draw. Just draw.
It'd be a nightmare
Yeah,
to like kind of just schedule like, oh god, like
yeah, I know.
over here just doing motion
Yeah.
capture, next week doing effects. So,
But I think it's good also because I think, especially with modern students, I mean, I talked about, you really have to have a kind of multidiscipline thing where you are specialized, but you still understand like how to unwrap a UV or how level designers will work with their program, how Unreal works as an engine or whatever engine you're using. Because at points you will have to cross slightly onto other realms of disciplines. So, like you said, you don't consider yourself a rigger, but it's good to know that, when you're maybe creating characters in 2D, you're trying to understand you're creating something that's going to be game ready. So you have to obviously think 3 or 4 steps a bit ahead about when this gets to the rigging department or this gets to the 3D department, how can I make this easy? Because I mean, I know concept artists, back in the day used to say, you know, they would hand stuff off to the 3D animators or 3D artists to build out the character, but then if they weren't getting the proper concepts in terms of like turnarounds or taking limbs off to show detail underneath, then that kind of stuff, hinders them more because then they have to coming back to the concept arts and say, hey, what was this texture? What was this turnaround? How should I model that? The more clear you can make those concepts, but then that comes from knowing how the 3D character guys work, right?
yeah, I will say probably the strongest asset you can have as a game developer is learning how to communicate, and not just learning how to talk to people, but understanding the language of other people's professions, understanding not just verbal jargon, but visual jargon, figuring out how uh, people think in regards to it's like, okay, yeah, learning those processes, being familiar with any and all of those departments, because yeah, if you don't know what an animator needs, like they're going to struggle. So the more you
Mm,
can do on your part to familiarize yourself with that department's needs, the easier it's going to be for you to do your job first time correctly, and
mm,
for them to execute on their end properly. So yeah, if I'm handing off uh, concepts to a 3D artist, I definitely know that I have to spell some things out. Yeah, I need to do texture reference. I need to kind of have renders that I've done effectively I need to have turnarounds, all these things.
Call out sheets, all that kind of stuff.
Right, even and I will do I'll do paint overs for certain things if there needs to be follow up. I'll learn how to export animated GIFs, whatever, however it's
Yeah, of course.
things. Yeah, I'll do some 2D rudimentary 2D animations for animators, like figuring out starting poses, or if a character is doing a summoner effect, I'll pass that off to effects, kind of just try and do. I mean, really, it's the starting point for a lot of other processes. So it's really cool being able to kind of dig in.
I mean, I kind of discovered that when recently I was in LA. I got a chance to go and visit Blizzard, and the museum that is near the public office was set up for Hearthstone that month. And it was interesting because when Jeremy was talking through some of the early effects that they put in the game, those were just pencil renders before that went anywhere near Houdini or whatever they were using for the VFX. But a lot of that stuff will start, like even gun explosions, shell ejections from guns, that stuff's all prevised in 2D before it goes anywhere near 3D. And I never knew that. At that point, I was like, oh, I never knew you built all those, the flame effects and everything. That was all done by hand before. Like even the thing in Hearthstone when the portrait cracks up and then explodes. Like that whole process was just storyboarded in 2D before they took that in to make it into an actual visual effect, which was interesting because you guys will be the same, and imagine with a lot of your gun animations or the acid effects, the explosions, that stuff's all previs as well. You guys do that the same thing, or?
Yeah. So a lot of times, even if we don't have time to kind of go in and manually make temp effects, I feel like if we need something quick, we can always kind of cannibalize and reuse old things.
Right.
The biggest thing for a lot of, especially animation, is just timing and kind of presence for a lot of those. So if it makes sense to have the cheapest, quickest method to kind of get the intended effect, or if they have quick 2D drawings for those Hearthstone effects, it's you don't want to go ahead and texture an entire asset. We always anytime we do we have new characters in games, we have concepts go out, and then proxy meshes will be put in just base gray, loosely rigged, just enough to kind of get enough of the silhouette and enough of seeing if there's any animation concerns regarding, I don't know, cloth or just collision or AI, any of that stuff. So it's there's always processes to kind of make sure that we're not overextending ourselves, just time wise, budget wise, all that kind of stuff. So definitely makes sense.
Yeah, to previs those things. Yeah, and again, I think just in general with production, time is always money. So if you waste a lot of that just spending maybe a month on a particle effect for a gun or something, it's people will also come back and what the fuck have you been doing for a month? This game ships in 6 weeks, what's happening? So but yeah, I mean, have you found since you went from kind of studio to studio, there's definitely a language or a rhythm that you found in each department, or have you found that each company has a different mindset when it comes to previs or concept?
It really depends on I feel like it kind of depends on the project sometimes, because I've worked on mobile projects, I've worked on educational projects, I've worked on live service stuff, and then I've worked on some AAA, here's a 3-year dev cycle, look at that when it's done. So having kind of an insight and seeing what the priority is on a deliverable date, and also just just the timing cycle for some of these things. It's been interesting to kind of go in and see what's really important. At the end of the day, 90% of the process is the same. There's only there's only so many ways you can put characters and props into an engine. That's not
of course.
We started out with everyone has a blackboard and we just it's not there's no magic to that. But just kind of seeing when I was working on SMITE, seeing the character pipeline, just how accelerated that was, and how many animators and character artists that were at that studio, because I mean that's the moneymaker, right? You make skins, you make new characters, that's the important thing. So that pipeline, all the character centric stuff was kind of priority one. And you would definitely see that, and a lot of times it was under a lot of stress. You'd have too much people be crunching, and it's just oh man, I really like I really kind of feel for these guys. And then like you go to a AAA space where it's like, all right, like instead of like 4 weeks to do this, you have like 10 weeks to do certain things.
Right.
Just because like it's budgeted, it's planned well. Um, and not to say that the other things aren't budgeted or planned well, but sometimes
Mm.
things can kind of caught up. So it's like, yeah, you have like production concerns, you have, yeah, on narrative based games or games that are like more or less reliant on kind of PvP, multiplayer, that kind of thing. Like there's definitely
Yeah.
different um, production concerns from the ground up. Like there's so many
Right.
additional things. It's not just player driven interaction. So
Yeah, no, I mean, like Hi-Rez does seem to be on top of their game when it comes to the stuff they're putting out. I mean, apart from obviously, you know, when they put out SMITE, you know, back in the day, I was a big fan of that also. But then Paladins came along, and it's really interesting because, like, recently when I was doing one of Raphael's classes, we actually had Ben Knapp
oh
in the one of the classes doing one of the things with Raph, and I was like, because he asked the question, I was like, "Are you the Ben Knapp from Hi-Rez Studio?" Or that he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh shit!" So, so yeah, me and Ben have kind of got tight over the last couple of months talking,
yeah.
but yeah, now obviously with Paladins coming out and the other projects, but I feel bad because I think Paladins almost fell by the wayside over Overwatch. But it also looks like such a well thought out art directed piece and game in general. I'm kind of almost thinking I really probably should give it a chance because it does look like such a complete package. Because you were on Smite when you worked there, right? You didn't do anything for Paladins.
I actually, so first off, I want to give a big shout out to Ben Knapp. When I started at Hi-Rez, he was kind of like the one guy I sat next to. He was kind of my mentor there. Still a very good friend.
Oh,
I saw him recently. Yeah, Ben is one of the nicest people that I've ever met.
oh, yeah.
And yeah, super talented artist. So yeah, shout out to you, dude. But
You need to speak to him actually. In fact, I might even message him after this podcast and try and get him on next
yeah,
because he
yeah.
definitely needs to come on. Yeah,
No, he's super knowledgeable. Just a really, yeah, he just loves making games, man.
yeah, man.
But so yeah, I worked on Smite for a little bit, and I was actually on the previous team for Paladins. Um,
Okay.
so that was a very interesting experience for me. There was a lot of, oh boy, there was I don't know how much I can say as far as like my time on that project. There it was stressful at times,
Okay.
kind of developing a new IP, uh,
Right.
having a lot of new information come in because you have, yeah, it's like you have a studio that finds a success on one project, and what works for one doesn't work for the other.
Of course,
So
yeah, because Smite is kind of similar where it's PvP, but then it's a first person shooter. It's not third person. You're not dealing with powers as much in the same way because you're in arenas. It's yeah. So yeah, yeah,
and I mean I will say like Hi-Rez definitely has their FPS chops in like their they ship Tribes Ascend
oh
in
yeah,
record time, by the way. That like I can't believe the dev cycle they had for that, and that game is still so much
yeah.
fun. I know they re-released an update which fixed a lot of the problems they had with that. So yeah,
Right.
Tribes is a wonderful game. So yeah, I think they took a lot of some of that knowledge and kind of brought it in. But yeah, like having to move into that, like kind of fusing that competitive player hierarchical skill based
Yep.
combat. That I would say is a game that developed over time,
Yep.
just the way that Smite did. There was a lot of
Yeah.
lessons to be learned on that kind of stuff, and I didn't stay on that project. I ended up leaving the company Gearbox, obviously, but
Mm.
I'm happy that they were able to kind of find a home for that project because yeah, it's hard. It's like I know it's funny. Like I was on the beginning team for Paladins, and I was like, hey, you want to come over here? And so I ended up working on Battleborn, which was
Mm.
another character-based shooter. Um,
Yeah.
so and it was also like very highly judged to be an Overwatch competitor.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was interesting, kind of in that space with all of these separate games coming out. I mean, like yeah, you have your trends like yeah, like the MOBA scene came out, and then yeah, the character based like FPS, and then
Yeah.
now you have all these things. So there's a lot of like group lessons and like the trends that are coming out. But
Of course.
yeah, I would say that yeah, Paladins, I'm super happy that it's found a voice and it's found a community. Um,
Yeah.
because yeah, you don't want to get lost in the
Yeah.
like weird wave of comparability. It's like, oh well, this one did
Of
it.
course. So anyway, so yeah, going past all that and the stuff you've done at Hi-Rez, what was it that brought you to Gearbox in general? Was it the project itself, or did you know a lot of people over there and you were interested in to see how they were dealing with it, or and at what point did you come into Gearbox? Was it right at the start, or?
So it was kind of a mix of a couple things. I was fortunate enough. So my buddy Jimmy Barnett, who was the weapons art lead for Borderlands 3,
Mhm.
that team was absolutely insane in what they tried to accomplish over three and a half years. I can't believe they did it. But he went to school with a couple of my coworkers over at Hi-Rez, my buddy KP, my friend Kate Pitstick,
Mhm.
um, who are wonderful designers. And so the three of us actually all ended up um, coming over to Gearbox in about a year or so's time. Like we all kind of just like, oh, we're just gonna transition. So
Right.
they had spent more time at Hi-Rez, but kind of looking for a change, and I
Mhm.
was also looking to kind of just expand. I wasn't gonna stay in Georgia for that long, and yeah, and like Hi-Rez was great. Um, Made some amazing lifelong friends there. Like
Mhm.
just yeah, really really quality people. But yeah, I was kind of looking to move into something different. So it was a combination of having an opportunity and also having yeah some friends who were also here. I would say yeah, having friends here is one of the things that makes it so great to work
Right.
uh, at the studio. It's one of my favorite parts. Actually, a couple of us all live in like the same neighborhood.
Right. Yeah.
We got houses all like within like a couple miles of each other, so we can just kind of hop on our bikes or our scooters and like, hey, let's all make dinner. Like, so it's really wonderful having a little like a localized community that you can interact with outside of the
Yeah.
office.
Is Gearbox in the West Coast, or where are you guys located?
We're located in Dallas, Texas, so we are smack dab in the middle of the
Oh,
U.S.
okay, right at the bottom. Yeah, one of my friends just recently moved there. Actually, he was in Philly. He was a
Okay.
concept dude, and Nick, and he was actually one of the guys who gave me my first job in the industry. I was doing some previs and animation for his game Mask of Semblance,
Nice.
and he's moved down now with his partner. I don't think they're in Dallas. I think they're just outside of
Are they in
maybe even
Austin?
Austin. I think they're close
Okay.
to Austin. But yeah, they're just down there just now. So but yeah, no, it's
Okay.
I've been told it's. I mean, because Ed's there as well, right? Ed Software, they're
Mm-hmm.
kind of stone throw from where you guys are as well.
Great. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of kind of good peeps down there. But yeah, Gearboxes. I mean, back in the day, I think my earliest known information about that studio was when they worked on the Half-Life mods. That's how they kind of got
Mm-hmm.
started back in the day. And then,
Oh
of
yeah.
course, Natural Progression, they made their own FPS. So, and then, of course, obviously, famously, they worked on Duke Nukem Forever. So, lest we not forget the classic that was that game. So, but yeah, so you've done this whole cycle now. Borderlands is out. Um, Looking back now, what do you think were some of the kind of highlights of that project for you as a maybe specifically as a concept artist? Was there things you got to do or try that were a lot different from the previous projects you had been on?
I mean, so definitely this was the biggest project, like as far as like team size, budget, hype. I would
Right.
say even like there was a lot of anticipation
Yeah.
that I would say came from it. So
Of course.
it was
Yeah.
cool, and it wasn't like a nervous expectation. It was more just like we're all just like super psyched
Yeah. Of
to
course.
work on something that people are just wanting. Um, so and yeah, I'd say a lot of us are huge FPS, and a lot of us like who are newer were previous Borderlands fans. So we had. It's interesting seeing the expectation that people who kind of come in like, oh, this is kind of what I think the game is, right? And like,
Right.
actually, it's more like tuned to this. There's a lot more serious notes, and we kind of just like sprinkle some comedic flavor on top. So
Yeah.
getting into the core of what makes that game different was a learning process for me, just artistically,
Right.
because I think people always will attribute the Borderlands franchise as this kind of insane comedic
Over the top
with
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. But there's a lot of very serious like undertones that kind of help ground it and make it so it's not such a circus.
Yeah, because I think there
Um,
has been, especially since the launch of two, there has been a lot of, no, I wouldn't say copycats, but people who have took that crazy inspiration and tried to, put it onto their other projects. I mean, I know even
mhm,
when I've looked at the latest iteration of the Rage series,
mhm.
I did see where they had probably taken hints of Borderlands, especially the colorfulness into the FPS space. So, so yeah,
No, I mean you kind of see it all over. Yeah, it's like there's I feel like there's no true original ideas anymore.
Of course.
It's all just kind of like permutations
Yeah.
on different strategies. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, we definitely had a big challenge with this project. Yeah, just making sure that it lived up to everyone's expectations, it delivered something new. Um, some of the cool things working, it was we do have a lot of personal freedom as artists to kind of
Okay.
inject ideas that we either want or things that we think are cool. Like there's a lot of I mean, I grew up loving mecha and just like construction equipment and like just a lot of weird like it's like, oh, I love how these like joints move. I love like seeing big machines and things like that. So
Yeah.
one of the coolest things I got to work on, one of the player characters for Borderlands 3 is Moze, and she has her big mech Iron Bear. So
Oh yeah, of course.
I was able to design her mech for that, and it was a really interesting task for me because yeah, I mean, I grew up loving Gundam and Zoids and all of these other like kind of fringe like pop culture like mecha
Yeah.
things. Like even the loader from Aliens was just like
Gundam and
super.
stuff like that as well. I'd imagine all the Asian inspired mecha stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we had an interesting task. It was like, all right, we want you to kind of design uh, this player-controlled mech, but it can only be 10 feet tall,
Right.
and it has to be this crazy unstoppable force. We're just like, ah, shit, how do we do that?
Yeah.
So we looked a lot. I looked at a lot of like machining Krieger, kind of like model kit
Hmm.
inspiration. A lot of like World War II, like bomber, like Panzer tanks, like a lot of like really kind of core, uh, gritty machinery, like that sort of stuff.
Right.
So you'll see, yeah, it's like we have like jet engines and big hydraulics and a lot of like kind of over stacked panels and fuel tanks and just like lines and like yeah, crazy military like mesh netting and like all these yeah just these kind of fun like it just feels like the inside of a cargo plane or something like that. So
Yeah, I remember watching the Twitch feed when Borderlands kind of just dropped, like the midnight
mhm.
launches and stuff were happening, and I didn't have, at the time I was kind of alone fun, so I was watching everybody else have fun with it. But yeah, I watched the Moe's kind of the gunner thing happening, and the minute when the mech's called down, it was almost like a Titanfall moment, like climbing in the mech and the screen's going up.
Yeah.
But it was amazing to see, like to integrate that kind of gameplay into an FPS as well, where you're already running and gunning with these crazy guns, but then all of a sudden there's a mecha on the boardwalk. Like it gets even more. It's like that ridiculous, kind of thing you're talking about, where it is a serious FPS, but at the same time, the craziness is like, right, great, you get to call a mech down now. Like this is the bonus. This is the add-on bonus. This is the great thing. So yeah, it's good. I mean, and then designing that thing. I mean, it's good that like you said, you've got freedom, because I think then if you get too restrictive, it will make the well, probably the gameplay suffer as well. But then you as an artist didn't want to be chained too tightly to the desk and saying that you can only influence this way, or you can only I mean,
Mhm.
the initial concept phase is always, it's such an idea generation machine, that you almost need to just be let loose at that stage and not really be given a lot of direction, because you already know the Borderlands franchise, the style guide, how that things need to look, but then having that freedom to then think, oh, this would be really cool if it was more based on this or based on this, and then bringing that into the world, um, is a great thing to do as a concept artist. And then you can obviously put your stamp on it when people play it and say, I made that. You can point towards it.
Right.
So yeah. So apart from the mech, was there any other ones that you thought were your kind of babies, or things that you really loved making? I saw in your portfolio recently there was a lot of the kind of dragon concepts, or this, is it Sauron, kind of the creatures that you built out?
Yeah. Yeah. We had these dinosaur alien. I mean, they're essentially just space dinosaurs.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think Saurian is a new name. Like there's roots in other like
Yeah.
MMOs and D and all that kind of stuff. It's like all right, like that's a familiar name. I get it.
Of course.
But I feel like we like there's a lot of referential stuff in the
Yeah.
Borderlands games, and looking at some of the creature designs, it was kind of able to like also put in some pop culture reference into that stuff. So
Right.
yeah, those were originally like more just like purely frog like. They
Mhm.
were these other weird kind of like kind of dinosaur creatures. So I was able to kind of take those to completion after the initial stages, and I wanted to work in these like agile prehistoric crocodiles with like long limbs, but also like you have these amphibious like touches with these kind of prehistoric dinosaur and like bird-like structures. So it was a cool process for me, kind of mixing all of these kind of like reptilian and amphibic and
Amphibic, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All of these influences into these things. So it was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then,
Well, sorry.
no, but I was going to say, but then it's great to just be handed in, these projects where you get to make such key characters, because sometimes, probably earlier on in your career, you would have been making, like background people or just, random NPCs. But then when you're getting handed like, I wouldn't say main characters, but things that are quite present or prominent at the front of the game, like you
Mhm.
said, the mecha. But then obviously, spoiler alert, if anyone's played Borderlands 3 or they want to know, don't listen beyond this for the next maybe 30 seconds. But you got to design or help design Tyrene, right? The final boss in Borderlands 3? The kind of.
Uh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. Again, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Um, so that process to me. So I didn't get to design Tyrene her base form. Like that was one of our external artists who's been working with us for a long time, Sergi Brosa.
Cool.
We actually just recently got to fly him over for the game's release. We've
Cool.
been working remotely with him for about 4 years, and
Nice.
he did an incredible job. He designed the main villains. He designed the entire bandit Children of the Vault army.
Yep.
The dude, yeah, he's just prolific, super nice. Like when he was here, it was like he was just like part of the family. Like I felt like I'd known him, like
Yeah,
I felt
forever.
like I'd known him for like a decade. But kind of building off of one of his designs was pretty cool.
Yeah.
One of our other designers, Matt Cox,
Hmm.
he was the one of the principal boss designers
Hmm.
for BL3. Um, he really gave me a great starting point
Yep.
for that project. He had kind of blocked out and done a lot of like pre-research. Like, hey, this is. It was actually one of the smoothest character design um, processes I had been able to go through. It's like, all right, like here's our like battle constraints. Here's what we're doing. Here's like how like tall. Like here's the scale we wanted at. Here's the attacks we wanted to do. And then with the art direction, I had all of these like other references from like the thing and like just all
Yeah.
these growth like weird, yeah, so there was just
I
like
was going to say,
two
yeah, I was kind of getting Thing vibes when I looked at, the concepts. It was definitely
yeah,
of that decaying, just falling out everywhere.
we really just
Really,
wanted to make it kind of gross and terrifying.
yeah,
Also too, yeah, we kind of had to pull back reference because it is a fusion of the boss from Borderlands 1, which is the
right.
Destroyer. So
Ah, okay,
Tyrene ends up like kind of merging with that creature. So it's a mix of kind of like her kind of amalgamation of what she's built up over the entire game, plus like the
right.
themes that are present in that one. So honestly, for us, it was a great like okay, we didn't really think uh, that first boss in the first game was really super fun. So it's like there were some cool like notes there. Like let's bring it back.
Mhm.
Let's give players a more rewarding experience
Yeah,
for that. So it was kind of a cool turnaround in that area.
yeah, because I mean, it's good that you can actually portray both styles of. I mean, I say both styles. I suppose as your concept artist, you want to try and be able to explore both, but you have a very good definition of being able to do very organic stuff, but then also pulling it back and doing the more hard surface stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at like Flack or like the other people you've done where are more droid based, even with Flack, you're also combining both worlds, right? The hard surface robot, and he's covered in coats and trenches and scarves. So I mean, it's good that you can explore that range, because I think obviously it makes you a lot more versatile as an artist in a project, because then you don't have to bring in extra people to do other things. You're like, no, I can turn my hand to that. I can do
Mm-hmm.
this. Do you feel like that's a good thing, even if you're specializing in 2D, that you should be able to explore, multiple styles? Because I mean, your stuff is obviously very stylized, but then if you needed, you probably could call on a more realistic approach to your work, right? You could
Mm-hmm.
then explore that as well. Um,
Yeah, no, I definitely have always liked even I. It might even be a little annoying to work with sometimes because I will like flip flop like during like a single task like on like style stuff that I'm doing. Just it's like oh like today I want to like work more ink. Today I want to work more painterly.
yeah.
And so I've always really enjoyed kind of exploring different styles like that.
Mhm.
But uh, I think it's made me a stronger artist. I feel like I can not so much chameleon at that point, but it's easier for me to kind of study and then kind of implement um, any style or resource that comes up that I find interesting.
Of
But
course.
yeah, absolutely. As far as like working a solely hard surface or working solely
Organic. Yeah.
organic, yeah, it's like at that point it's just design, like
Yeah.
just knowing the principles of any of that sort of stuff. I will
Yeah.
say with Flack, like Flack was a very cool character to bring forward. There were a lot of hands. Like it's very rare in any of these situations where one person kind of owns the entire thing. Like there's usually a chain of influences. People say, "Oh, I like this decision," or they really like these influences, and people kind of come together. Usually, it's like one person will take it to completion. But Flack was very interesting. I know we have an art book coming out soon. Which is really awesome for the game, and there's a
Mhm.
lot more exploration. It's like how we kind of came up with Flack's aesthetic. Um, yeah, and initially it was this kind of like druidic character, this kind of like space elf, and then yeah, we kind of settle on this more kind of robotic. It was almost I think the initial sketches he had like kind of gold chains, very chappy
Yeah.
um, influence there, but yeah, we had maybe 5 or 6 different artists kind of throwing down. And then in the end, I'd kind of taken some of those and then like added my own twist and just kind
Mhm.
of putting stuff together. And I was like, all right, like this actually feels cool now. Like we can move forward. And so they kind of let me push that forward. So definitely a lot of other influences to draw from, even internally, not just like as far as like external. Uh,
Yeah.
so it was a cool character to bring forward. And I'm really glad that everyone uh, everyone kind of jumped on. And yeah,
Yeah.
they got really popular. And like I don't know, the fan art community is like very large on them. And so yeah, it's been really, really rewarding.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be interesting as well from an artist's perspective because you're sitting sketching this stuff out and then seeing somebody do like a fan art of like your stuff. I mean, it's going to be an interesting look at like how that's interpreted as well because yeah, a lot of people will spend so much time making these things solid and then seeing people copy that stuff and get influenced. It's going to be a cool thing, right? Just people, it's like when I suppose when people get tattoos of like, those guys come up to Raf at the event with tattoos of like God of War stuff on them and, paintings of like things they had done God of War wise. And he was like, oh my God, like, but yeah, the fan community is going to be crazy good in this kind of stuff because like you said, you spend so many months designing stuff, hoping that, people enjoy it. Nobody's going to shout at you for changing stuff. And then, of course, because I remember when I spoke to some of the guys at the God of War team when I was at Lightbox, they were saying that one of the biggest fears they had sitting in the crowd at E3 was because they had taken Kratos' Blades of Chaos away and replaced it with the axe. They were thinking people were going to be like, oh no, this is terrible. But then, of course, the reaction, people lost their minds. Um, so, I mean, that's going to be a thing as well, right? Because Borderlands 2 was like such a big hit. 3 coming along, you guys redesigning all the kind of main 4 heroes. Um, was that a fear when you were sketching this stuff out? Like, are we staying true to the Borderlands stuff, or did you feel like you had a really good handle on it from the start? Or
I think from the beginning, we always were pretty confident that we weren't worried that people were gonna like miss what we brought in the previous games too much. I mean, like
yeah,
we still try to deliver on all of the versatility that people kind of expected.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it was a chance for us to branch out and try some new things. Like
right,
that's like one of the coolest things as an artist. So it's like, all right, like this is gonna be wide, like large scale, but also like you're gonna be able to do something completely new.
mm-hmm.
And even in the context of a game like Borderlands, which has all these freaking characters, in my opinion, but probably too many characters. Like being able to find spaces in there where you can still do something that hasn't been tapped
right,
is cool. And yeah, like as far as like fan expectation, like Borderlands fans are crazy. Uh, like people will get tattoos. Like the cosplay community is insane. I had the chance to go to Gamescom in Cologne, Germany, to help work the floor there.
right,
And yeah, it's like you like we're working the main booth. Like we're out there 10, 12 hours a day, making sure people are like having fun, fixing technical problems, but also like just seeing people come through. Like we had all these crazy cosplayers and like just in as much broken German or their broken English as possible. It's just like everyone was just so excited, and it was just really cool kind of being there. I remember personally, I'd gone to PAX East in Boston uh, in 2011 to
Mhm.
with a bunch of friends, and as a fan of the Borderlands franchise, kind of standing in line to play Borderlands 2 at the time. So it was cool, kind of coming full circle from that. Like I was able to, it's like I got a shirt back then, and like now I was like out here giving out some swag and some merch, and making sure everybody was having a cool time. So it's really interesting. Like you never know if people are thinking it's like, oh, I'm never gonna get there. It's like you never know where you're gonna be in like 7, 8 years. Like you gotta really just, I don't know, just pay attention. Just really kind of take a chance on some things. So yeah, if anyone listening is worried about like not getting their break or not having any success, like well, just just be cool, talk to people, be good at what you do. Like really just try and make that shit happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always a good thing because in this industry, I think we all start as fans. We all start as people wanting to work on these projects. I mean, it's the reason you go to school. It's the reason you draw every day because, one day I'll get to design this person. Day I'll get to, my drawings will be on the walls of Gearbox and all this kind of stuff. And then it happens, and then the only thing you want to do after it happens is then inspire other people to do the same. So yeah, especially I think I was talking to Raph about that at Lightbox, saying that it was really good saying about the job is when you take the elevator up is to send it back down for other people. So yeah, I think it's very common as artists, you get to a point in your career you're like, right, who can I now educate or inform or inspire? How do I do that? And then obviously it's great now with stuff like Gumroad and these online schools. You can partner with them and you can make
Mhm.
tutorials and get them rapidly distributed towards people. So you were saying that that might be a plan for you in the future. You're thinking about maybe starting to teach or starting to do some tutorials or some design stuff.
I mean, yeah, it's like I think I'm at the point where I could definitely put some things out. I would like to really put some time forward and figure out something that I could do that's different from all of these other. I mean, like I don't want to just like here's how I make characters, because I don't really think the way that I make characters is anything special. Um,
Right.
I'd like to kind of dig in and really get into more like technical process on like if I like I don't know, like it's like, oh, if I want to do like mechanical design classes or something that isn't like so widely uh, pushed. I know there's a lot of like even like with ArtStation's new um, learning kind of,
Yeah, like the
not
the subscription thing they've got on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's so much more opportunity now with that. Like go like props to them.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like I definitely want to kind of just try and do something different. I feel like that's kind of more my speed anyways. I don't really want to do what's popular. I want to
Right.
kind of find that's just a weird like perpendicular avenue. It's like, all right, well, what about this thing over here that nobody's like looking at? So I feel like
Yeah,
there's
of
a
course.
lot that's lost in the popular scope. There's so many cool things in the art space. A lot of cool indie games that get overlooked.
Yeah.
So I feel like yeah.
I think it's definitely a thing that will make you stand out more if you take the time to really put your stamp on the tutorial stuff because there's almost a failure in that where, if people try to almost copy what other people have already done, then, you're then fighting against those people as direct competition. And then, I suppose it would be like something maybe trying to do just a basic character anatomy class, but there's already Glauco stuff out there and Rafts plus others, like
Scotty
is that
and like,
yeah,
all
is
sorts
that
of
going to
things.
be any better than their stuff? I mean, I'm not saying like obviously Raf and Glauco are like the best in the world. I mean, they probably are, but like at the time, like going up against those guys, if you aren't on their level or above, then yeah, it's almost like it's hard to fight that. But then if you're doing something with a totally unique spin, maybe even just like something like how you really use your colors or how you really find that stylized edge, that could be stuff that is, especially I think when it comes to stylized stuff, because I've not seen a ton of stylized art, especially like people who maybe hand paint textures or have that real stylized edge. Like that's very very rare now. I think. I mean, I was speaking to some of the guys on the Warcraft team when I was there at
Mhm.
Blizzard. They were saying it's almost impossible now to find people who have the base level 3D stuff, but can also hand paint, hand render textures for stylized games because it just isn't taught anymore to paint to that extent. Because a lot of people in 3D will now use pre-made textures and substance or Mari, and not really take the time to bring things into Photoshop and hand render stuff. So when they
Yeah,
find stuff, yeah,
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's kind of insane how that's already becoming almost a lost art.
yeah,
I think like 20 years ago when you had like that was all you had was just your diffuse um,
yes,
textures, and all of these games were so heavily hand painted. Even if they were realistic looking, like all of that was done uh, just very
by
very
hand,
baseline. Yeah,
yeah,
just on. So yeah, I've heard that from multiple studios. I know we talked about. Grace Liu, who works down at Airship. They
hmm
put out Battle Chasers, which is a phenomenal game, phenomenal studio.
of course,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's like so special that they can still make uh, these kick-ass games
yeah,
that look so impressive. And like yeah, like I can imagine how hard it is with all
yeah,
of the influx of like photogrammetry and just all
hmm
these new processes and texture creation. Like it's kind of wild just seeing like where everything's going. And you'd think that it
yeah,
would kind of expand like outwardly in like like kind of just this big wedge. Like it's like oh no, like everything is kind of branching out more. But yeah, it's unfortunate that more people aren't taking an interest and they kind of just want to do those hyper real things. Like there's so much more than just mimicking reality. Like
yeah,
at least like, sure, it's very cool, but I think if you can kind of contort that and go have a little bit more of an impressionistic side to
yeah.
things, that's really what's going to last.
Yeah, I think it's like stuff like your stuff is stuff like your stuff. Your kind of work is very unique in its sense where I think because Borderlands almost teeters on that edge between realism and stylized, like it almost marries both worlds into one thing. Because then even like looking at your stuff now, it actually reminds me of Stephen Oakley's work, if you know Stephen at all. But
Yeah,
um,
he was actually a big inspiration on some of these. I don't want to say that I kind of like took his style, but
mhm,
definitely looking at his work definitely helped me understand some of the more, I guess, gritty like creature forms I was trying to get out of some of these
yeah,
things. And so yeah, like, I think I had some drawings that really relied heavily on stuff that he kind of perfected.
yeah, and
Um,
that's not a bad thing. I think it's very common. I mean, it's how we all get better, right? I say we all steal from each other, but we all take inspiration from other people that we work with and other things that we see in the world. Like, a lot of it is sure playing video games, is watching movies, is, experiencing the real world, but sometimes it is also looking at other artists' work and how they interpret the world
Mhm.
and thinking, I actually love their vision. I love how they see the world. I want my stuff to, reflect that as well and be part of that same conversation. So, I think when people um, there's a difference between copying somebody and taking inspiration, right? So, if you were saying a lot of your design theory or a lot of your design choices were taken from stuff that Steven had designed, then that is definitely a compliment. As long as you're not ripping directly off his designs, of course, then that's fine. But yeah, definitely, if you're just taking inspiration from his stuff, then it is a very big compliment because um, I know if I was making something, and people were saying, "Oh, you really inspire me." Like it's like when I met people at Lightbox, fun enough, who when I was talking in my Scottish accent, they were like, "Oh, I recognize your accent," and I was saying, "Oh, I do a podcast called Digital Artcast," and they're like, "Oh yeah, I listen." But it was crazy, right? Like even coming from the flight from Chicago to LAX, I was ordering a drink, and one of the guys sitting next to me was like, "Oh, you're Gordon, right?" I was like, "What the fuck?" But he
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, I listen to your podcast." I was like, "Holy shit!" Like I was nearly in tears. But like, yeah, when you meet people like that have got your work, and at Lightbox, we were sitting all weekend, just people coming to Raf and saying, "Oh, you're such a huge inspiration. I love your work.
Mhm.
I follow you on Instagram. I love all your 3D prints." And his Yoshimitsu thing was selling out. Yeah, it was just like, it was crazy to see him, because I think for him that is the time he gets to come out of his shell after production and meet the fans, meet people who like his work, and then because then he has to go back into another production shell for years. But yeah, it's good to just come out and get some air and hear what people thought about um, the game that you worked so hard on, because you pour so much of yourself into production. It's good to know people are feeding back like, no, I really enjoyed it. I really, it has really inspired me. And then hopefully, you know, you never think about this stuff, but think 20 years from now when people are like, oh yeah, like I really got any drawing because I remember Borderlands 3 coming out and Max Davenport sketches really inspired me. Like, how crazy would that be? You know what I mean? Like, you would be losing your mind. You'd be like, oh really? Wow, that's cool. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
do you think about that stuff down the line about how you're inspiring other people,
Yeah,
or?
like whenever if I'm head down like working on stuff, I mean like I don't think anyone who's like flow state designing anything is thinking like, oh, I can't wait for my legacy to really burn forward. No, no, no. It's such a
Yeah,
bizarre history. Like we all came from. I feel like anyone who's interested in this is like at heart like such a proto nerd. Like
yeah,
it's like oh, I grew up playing trading card games and
mhm,
like staying up and trying to get the street lamp on my freaking Game Boy so I could play like Link's
yeah,
Awakening, like, yeah, just like all these like little things. No, I mean, I I think it's cool if people definitely plan. It's like, oh, I can't wait till I'm like famous one day. But uh,
mhm,
to have like such a like I guess love driven
mhm,
art form as video games, like it's such a bizarre profession. Like thinking that there are artists that are like rock stars to
yeah,
me is like total antithesis to kind of like what we should be aspiring to as artists. Like it shouldn't be, I mean, like in such a kind of like social media dominated space where you have
yeah,
like all of this um, popular avenue. You have Tumblr and you have all of these online art sources and even like now like conventions like you're saying like you went to Lightbox and you went to
mhm,
I know like Playgrounds is happening right now over in Berlin,
yeah,
um, and you just have this. I mean, because it is a huge industry now, and
yeah,
people are interested, people are curious, they're concerned with like how people are doing things. There's a lot of money in it, um, so it's just it's not that it's a bad thing, but it's like you sometimes can see people get too wrapped up in that social element where it's like they will. I mean, and maybe that's just something that's inherent in fame itself, or people kind of get
yeah.
wrapped up into it and they start losing focus on something that's kind of core or not to be like purist about it, but like I don't know,
Oh, of
man.
course.
Uh,
I think it's trying to take the ego out of your work, right?
right, and well, even just no matter how successful a product gets, like understand like why you got into it in the first place. Like
Of
don't
course.
at that point do it for the clicks. Like do it
Yeah,
because you love making it. Like um,
yeah.
because yeah, I mean like when I was 10 designing little shitty original characters, it wasn't just like oh I can't wait for people to see these. It was like no, these are for me only. Like I'm gonna keep these and then like hopefully no one will ever know what I do. Like
Yeah, yeah. No, I think there's definitely I think two frames in mind where people can, want both. I mean, I think my earliest introduction to that kind of stuff was listening to Jim Lee
okay,
of DC Comics, like when he talked about, those moments where he gets to sit at Comic Con and draw those headshots for people.
yeah.
He was like, that was one of the things I dreamed about when I was younger was, people coming up and being like totally in awe of my art and be like, I want a sketch from you because I think there's part of us, part of all of us that kind of want something similar. Not to say that you're a diva about it or you have an
Oh
ego,
no,
but
no,
almost,
we definitely
yeah,
crave validation in that sense. Like I won't say that every time that like I recently had some shit shared on Twitter and I was like, oh, that got 8,000 retweets, and I was like, fuck yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. No, but
yeah,
yeah, I can totally get that. Like, but yeah, doing it like if you get too caught up into that, I think it can be a little toxic.
of
But
course,
no,
yeah.
no, there's nothing wrong with wanting to yeah, kind of
Yeah, I
also
think it's having the balance right. It's acknowledging the fuck yeah, but also then going back to your desk and doing work right. It's not getting to the point where you're like, oh, I don't need to draw anymore, or I don't need to try at my work anymore, or what I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody would ever do that, but that's obviously what you're talking about is taking that ego and then exploding it into something that can be toxic.
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, like talking about like uh, in we were talking about influences before, and
Mm-hmm.
seeing like how artists will influence each other in like a specific space, but also
Mm-hmm.
realizing like I feel like a lot of new artists look too much
Yeah,
at popular media and don't focus enough on kind of source material. They don't go out. It's like yeah, just go sketch, like go do plein air, like learn
yeah.
watercolor, go like get out, take a hike, like go like I don't know, study flowering, study like
Yeah, draw more from
study,
life than like something maybe who wants to get into character design will sit and maybe copy your flat designs, but then at the same time you've went and studied mechanical parts and real life people to come at that design. Like you didn't just draw mech straight away. Like there's always that foundation that people, I mean, I hear it very common in people, especially when it comes to drawing,
Mm-hmm.
is that, I mean, in 3D as well, people will neglect a lot of foundational skills because they want to draw the cool robot with a million guns, right? But then you've got to draw circles and spheres and perspective and shading and color and light and composition. That all needs to come, before that stuff really flourishes. And because when you draw that stuff, the cool mechs with the million arms and cannons, if your perspective is off, if your foundation's off, if you can't actually draw a sphere, then yeah, that stuff sticks out like a sore thumb, right?
I mean, I think it has to be in conjunction. Like, you still need to practice those design chops. Like, you need, like, yeah, obviously, like, learn your basics, learn your foundations, but also, like, it's not a bad thing to fail early.
Yeah,
On a lot of those things, like, I wouldn't tell you it's like you can't draw anything cool until you master how to
yeah,
perfectly shade your cube. Like, that's bullshit. Like,
yeah,
I would have thrown yeah, I would have thrown a fit. And it's like, no, screw you. Like, just like have fun.
yeah,
Like, a lot of my early robot designs were complete shit. So it's like, yeah, like having
yeah,
a decade or 15 years of like failing at learning how to draw like leg sprockets or like
of
anyway, it's
course.
like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's just part of it. Like, you just need to be able to learn how to not do something first.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's more people who would take those drawings that are lacking foundations and then present them as like, can this get me a job? And then people will obviously look at that and be like, well, this is lacking, the foundational stuff that, it kind of looks cool and whatever. But then if you're an art director sitting looking at that stuff, or if you were reviewing a portfolio and, like the perspective was off or the anatomy was really not great, you'd be like, well, yeah, your designs are cool, but like your foundation stuff is still underneath that, and that's what's letting it down mostly.
yeah.
So I think that's why it's important to build those foundations early, because once you get that kind of stuff out of the way, and it does kind of almost get out of the way at one point, once you've drawn a person enough times, like anatomy never really changes. So once you have that under your belt, then sure, you can go wild, right? You can draw whatever you want. So
No, yeah,
yeah,
definitely, yeah. Definitely get your basics down, but never stop trying to try new things.
yeah,
And
of course,
new artists, be okay with failure. It's gonna happen every day. I usually, the first hour I'm working on stuff is usually things that I need to kind of get out or filter or just like not use.
yeah,
Part of this industry is throwing work away,
yeah,
just because we are imperfect and our creative process. Like, a lot of the things, it's like, well, that was complete crap. Like, I need to just like not present this.
yeah,
That's why we do iterations. That's why we do thumbnails. That's why we do
yeah.
uh, tests.
That's
Like,
why you have sketchbooks on your desk, because those
right.
are almost like a fail Bible, right? They're just set up to fail. So
No, yeah, it could be fun. Yeah, just like setting up a talk on just
just failing in
how to
general.
improve the way you fail. Yeah, it's like could be
Yeah, no,
fun.
I mean, like it's interesting though, because me and a friend had a talk about this, and it kind of, I had an almost epiphany at one point where we were talking about failure and how, his parents at the time had always treated something he'd done wrong with a lesson to learn and how to move forward and how to better himself. But then most times when I failed when I was younger, I got yelled at and, was told I was wrong for doing it, or, how can you not do it right the first time, all this kind of stuff. So that's why I think I have such a struggle now as an artist coming into this world, is because, I almost have a mentality sometimes of like, why even start or why do this? Because the mentality is that I'm going to fail anyway, or even when I fail, someone's going to shout at me, so I don't want to fail. So I think it almost is dependent on how you see failure as a very young child, or how it's treated when you're younger, because that will then inform how you treat it as an adult. And for a lot of people, they can be lucky where failure was never something that really held them back. But for me, I think the way I was kind of handled when I was younger, it definitely left a sour taste in my brain, and made me think more of the negative than the positive of failure. So yeah,
Definitely, yeah.
but definitely, yeah, I think it's definitely, like you said, it's a bigger can of worms that you can get into in an hour podcast. But you're always welcome to come back on, Max, and talk about it. But yeah, I think it's definitely something I think I'd love to try and get a few artists' perspective on, because it seems to be a very big talking point at events. Because I was just going to talk about literally how people I know, students especially, are very precious with their sketchbooks, and almost don't want to draw on them because they're afraid of making them look bad. But then, like when Feng was talking about that way back in the day, Feng Zhu, he was like, sketchbooks should be a place where you fail and fail consistently, and then you do your good work on Photoshop. But then people who can't even fill a sketchbook, you're almost setting yourself up for failure at that point, because you've not really had the failure or the prep in the sketchbook before you come and then try to match it in Photoshop. So So yeah, like it's very common. It's a very big topic just now in art. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot you could expand on, but it's it would take way too long. We need another whole hour, if not more, to try and talk about and unravel this kind of stuff. But of course, Max, like all artists, will have plans and things to do later today. So I'm going to let him go and let him get on with his day. But it was really awesome to talk to you, Max.
Yeah, same.
Thank you very much for coming on. I'm very honoured to speak to you. And yeah, I'll leave all Max's stuff down below. If you've got any questions or comments, just leave them in the comments, and then yeah, we'll get back to him at one point. Maybe get back on to speak about some other topics. But thanks again to Max. Thanks for you guys for listening. Make sure to check us out on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcast services. There's lots of things, and we will be back with another episode very soon. Thanks again, Max.
Thank you.